Hey y'all, this is Mr. Boer coming at you with the first lesson that we have for chemistry, first video lesson. Like we said, if you have any questions, number one thing, make sure you email me, mark.boer@edisonschools.us. Best way to get a hold of me. Now, this is a condensed version of a review for us. We've already done the periodic table, but this is the first attempt at a video, so we'll see how this goes. So here goes the periodic table. On each of these, we tried to scale them down and only do a couple of the objectives that we had talked about in class. I think one of the main things we're going to need to know for the periodic table is being able to compare, the first periodic tables that people came up with, and then what we use today is the modern periodic table, and knowing the different scientists that developed those. A second objective we're going to try to accomplish in these 5 to 10 minutes, we'll be able to classify elements on the periodic table. Both we want to be able to look at the types of elements themselves, how to classify them, and then also each group of the periodic table, at least the groups that have names and why they have names that they do. And a third objective that we tried to focus on was being able to identify certain trends that are found. And we look at 4 different things: the atomic size, the ionic size, the electronegativity, and the ionization energies of the elements. And we look at what those trends do, whether they increase or decrease depending on where you're at on the periodic table. So and this is a condensed PowerPoint. I do have the full one on your links. You're to be able to look at all of it, and that you have. We start off, scientists really didn't have a need for a periodic table at the beginning because most of the elements are only a handful of elements known, probably about 12 to 13 elements. Some of those, like gold, copper, the ones that we talked about is not having symbols that start sometimes with their names. Are usually named after their Latin names. Those are the ones, and there were only a handful of them. Like it says there, yet only about 13 were identified by the year 1700. There was no reason to have a periodic table because really the periodic table is there to organize the elements. But as time went on and more were discovered, the scientists found a real need to try and organize these and put them into some type of grouping. Which brings us to the first gap. First periodic table, as far as real periodic table, was made by Dmitry Mendeleev, a Russian chemist and teacher. Because at that time they had about 70 known elements that they had to try and group. So he thought the best way to group them would be to arrange them according to atomic mass. With atomic mass, he was able to put them in columns based on their chemical properties. Those that shared chemical properties, we put in the same column. And then he grouped them left to right according to atomic mass. And he found out there was a little bit of a correlation that existed between them. But he found out there were some undiscovered elements. He left blanks on certain elements that didn't fit his patterns that he tried to come up with. And we find out that it is a very good way to predict, or was a very good way to predict, elements that would be found later. Now, if you look at the periodic table, there were some problems in his that he had. He had cobalt and nickel in such a way that they didn't really match up with their chemical properties. Obviously, we listed a few more that didn't fit. When you switch them, as Moseley does, and puts them in according to atomic number, you find out that they fit basically perfect as far as their chemical and physical properties of each one. Again, brings us to 1913, where Henry Moseley comes up with what we consider the modern periodic table, and he changes Mendeleev's first draft, which was according to atomic mass, and he switches it to atomic number. And is what we use today. The symbol, atomic number, mass are all basic items. Now, if you do have your book, page 162, 163 will show you the full periodic table, as you see there. And the numbers that you see on the top are going to be atomic numbers. So